and welcome back to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup. I am, of course, joined by Richard. Richard, hello. I think he's there. Hello, Richard.
I've lost you.
No?
That's a good start.
That's a great start. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me well? I'm hoping Richard can hear me. Well, we can definitely see Richard. So we can definitely see you, Richard. So once you're live, do let us know.
I'm going to leave and come back.
Okay, great. I'm going to be here by myself then, talking about the topics that we've got going on this week. So, of course, I don't know if you were across the royal story yesterday, where we saw King Charles and the Queen Camilla attacked with eggs by a man shouting "UK built" on blood of slaves. Well, Richard, our Daily Express's royal correspondent, will be able to give the latest on that. There is the picture, and there was quite a few dramatic videos coming from it. King Charles didn't seem that fazed by it, actually, when it happened. Here's the video. As you can see, they're walking along, and that's when the eggs come closer. That was shortly, obviously, followed by the police, obviously getting the man involved there. We want to know your thoughts about this. Should King Charles be worried? Do you think he handled it well? Let us know. And then we'll be moving on to Catherine Middleton, who, well, should I say Catherine now, who'll be hosting a heartwarming Christmas service and noting her change of royal duties. There was a very sweet video which came out of her handing a poppy across to a young boy on a visit yesterday. So let's take a look at this very, very sweet, heartwarming moment there. And that was across a few of the papers today. This, of course, leads up to Remembrance Sunday, where we will see the first state event happening since the Queen's passing at the Cenotaph on Sunday. There's always lots of pictures that do come from that. We've had some balcony moments with the late Queen and Catherine. We have also had some moments when the senior royals, before they stepped down, Harry and Meghan also on the balcony, but there's a picture of the Queen Consort and the now Princess of Wales looking out on the balcony. And we'll be talking about The Crown. The Crown has officially been released. Have you been binge watching it? There's been lots of talk about it online from royalists, as well as people who are saying that perhaps they should boycott this series due to the fact that it's going to damage the reputation of what people actually think the royal family is like. The key thing to remember here is it's a dramatization and it's not a documentary. And then we will be talking about Harry and Meghan have had their say on politics, encouraging people to vote on their Archewell website. There they are, strolling along as they do in one of their events. I think then they were senior royals before they stepped down. But Richard, I think you're back.
I am. As soon as the music stopped, it just went dead.
Good. You just saved me just in time, because I got through to the final topic of what we were talking about. So that's good news. Okay, well, let's welcome back Richard, the Daily Express's royal correspondent, to actually give some context as to what I've just teased talking about on the Royal Roundup today. Thank you for bearing with us.
Swearing, by the way.
No, we didn't hear any swearing, thank God. Well, yesterday, Richard, King Charles and Camilla or Queen Consort were on a walkabout, weren't they? And they had eggs thrown at King Charles. So give some context as to what actually happened.
They did. So they were in York for a number of reasons. One of which was to unveil a statue of the late Queen Elizabeth, which was a pretty spectacular moment, and they were targeted by a suspect. I think we have to be slightly careful how we word this, because a 23-year-old man has been arrested and bailed, I think, to appear in court at a later date on a public order offence. So I think we better just slightly be careful how we word things.
Yeah.
We shouldn't presume guilt. But yes, somebody who was shouting appears to be a climate activist, Green Party council candidate, and a Extinction Rebellion activist. Was shouting, I think, a little bit about climate change, possibly, but what was really heard was shouting about slavery, and then eggs were thrown, and 4 eggs were pelted at the king and queen consort. None of them hit them, as far as we could see, and I have to say he handled it pretty well, the king. I mean, he just, one of the police officers said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yes, let's just carry on." And I guess it's an occupational hazard. I mean, it's by no means the first time that as he was, Prince of Wales has been targeted by people. I suppose it's almost inevitable you're going to get protesters. I mean, what's slightly ironic is that he has spoken more about slavery probably than any other member of his family since Prince Albert campaigned against slavery in the 19th century, and has made it clear via aides and indeed by one of his goddaughters the other day that he really wants to encourage a national debate about slavery, and he would like British people to learn about the transatlantic slave trade in the same way that we learned about the Holocaust, for example. So he's by no means shrinking away from it. I mean, I would say he doesn't want to debate the idea of reparations, which is the former policy of several Caribbean nations, and I think previously African countries have called for reparations for slavery. He doesn't want to get involved in that, and it looks like he doesn't really want to get talking about how the royal family, his predecessors from Queen Elizabeth I for a couple of hundred years really, were very actively involved in the slave trade. But he does want to debate it. So
he wants to debate it on his terms.
He does. But yeah, I mean, some Vivian Clark is saying, "I bet the egg throwers' parents are so proud of themselves for dragging up such an idiot." That was certainly the view of many people in the crowd who were shouting all sorts of things at the person who was taken away. So,
I mean, he very much sort of took the attitude, though, from what I could see, was keep calm and carry on. He really didn't look fazed.
No, I don't think so. I mean, he literally just barely a sidestep for one that came quite clear, cut quite near, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's, I think there was a case in, if I remember, Australia years ago where somebody appeared to try to assassinate him. I think it was a fake pistol, or I'm a bit hazy on the details, but I just remember that the story of how the press pack got to him, I think, before the police, and jumped on top of him, and somebody was just saying, "What's your name? What's your name?" just so they could get the details to report who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, inevitably, it was a news story in most papers today. I mean, quite a lot of people on social media were saying, well, there were thousands there who were cheering them, and why are you focusing on one person? But I think it is a story. It is a story still.
It is a story, and
one bad egg, I think.
Yeah, but should he be worried at all, or I mean, is this reflective at all? You follow the royal family; that's your day-to-day job, Richard. Is this very rare occurrence? He shouldn't be worried that it'll be followed up by other egg-throwing attacks.
It is fairly rare, yeah. I mean, I think there was somebody in Northern Ireland who was shouting a bit of political abuse at Princess of Wales, I think, Kate, a few weeks ago, saying, you're not out, you should go back to your own land or something like that. It goes with the territory, but he's got a very experienced team of Scotland Yard bodyguards around him, and so has Queen Camilla. So they just have to remain vigilant, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna move on now, onto a heartwarming Christmas service, which is lovely, and we have seen Kate, Catherine, before on the piano, if I'm right in thinking, Richard. Are we going to see this again?
Well, the palace is staying tight-lipped about this at the moment. We've all been asking, well, how is she going to top playing the piano on TV last time? So we've got, and unfortunately they haven't answered that question yet. So the pressure is on her, isn't it? She's got to top that somehow. But yeah, same format as last time. I mean, interestingly, originally the BBC were going to be screening the Christmas Carol service last year, but if you recall, the Palace had a bit of a row with the BBC over a, a program. A two-series program about the relationship between the palace and the media, and took against the BBC over that. So asked ITV to host it instead, and they've stuck with ITV this year. And I think it's clear that there will be other members of the royal family there, and you've got Mike and Zara Tyndall there, and Sophie in that picture, and I think there will be a reasonably decent turnout again from the royal family.
Now, you know what question's coming, don't you, Richard?
Oh,
who can we expect there? Can we see everyone in the royal family, or just senior working royals?
It's hard to say at the moment. My guess is it will be more of the younger royals, rather than, let's say, the king and queen consort. But details to be confirmed. It's, I think, being recorded on, if I remember rightly, December the 17th. And I think it'll go out on Christmas Eve on TV. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be another big occasion. And probably, as we're seeing already, we've seen today at Westminster Abbey, tributes paid to the memory of the Queen, the late Queen, and I would imagine, only guessing, that there will be something in that service as well that will talk about the Queen as well.
And obviously, Kate had a very close relationship with the Queen, didn't she? So I can imagine it will have a few personal touches in there.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and obviously we're seeing lots about Kate Catherine at the moment. Yesterday there was a very sweet video which came out, which we can take a look at, which showed her giving her poppy to a young schoolboy, I think. So Richard, is this just a PR stunt, or is it genuine?
No, I think it was genuine. I mean, unfortunately, I was inside. I was doing the rota for that engagement, and myself and the Press Association's court correspondent, we were both inside, and I think they just said, "Well, she's just leaving now," and so we were talking to people, checking a few facts and whatever, and that video was actually taken by the mother of. I think the mother of the little boy. He's only 3 years old, and Rhiannon Mills from Sky News, actually. I think you can see her in the background of the video, but she just come out and caught the end of it, and then went over and asked. Can't see Rhiannon now. I thought I could see Rhiannon, but yeah. And asked the mother if she could use the video. So it was a very sweet moment. But I wanted to, be interesting to get some feedback from viewers, readers, in that I thought, but my paper used that picture in this morning, and I was a bit surprised. If it had been me, I thought what was more interesting was what she was actually saying inside. So it'd be interesting to hear what other people think. Um, you know, inside, she was visiting an integrated children's centre, and she was calling for a change in the way that um, uh, pregnant women and women who've just had children um, are treated in this country. If they get low, they get depressed, they feel lonely, or they have other problems that um, involve agencies like social workers or the criminal justice system. I mean, you get people who have addiction problems, for example, but there are lots of people, that, for example, who suffer postnatal depression. And she was saying that centre in Hillingdon, West London, which is fairly unique in the UK, from what I understand, was a way forward, and that people across the country should be treated in the same way, so that you go into a non-clinical setting. You go in, go to a children's and mothers group, or mothers to be group, and issues are raised about how you're feeling, whatever, and then you can get referred to perinatal psychiatrists or other specialists and seek help. And then there are also volunteer organisations, and I thought it was really interesting. And I think I think there's a danger that, although that was a really cute moment, I think there's a danger that the Princess of Wales is sort of pigeonholed as a sort of bit of fluff, really, as a bit of light relief from the sort of hard news agenda, the war in Ukraine, whatever. And I always say that is partly how the royal family are covered by us in the media. But I think I think there have been times when we've sort of said, well, she didn't really say anything that interesting, and if she'd said something more interesting, we would have covered that, rather than what she's wearing, what she looks like, or some sweet little moment like that. And I think yesterday she did say something really interesting about why change is needed in the way pregnant women are treated in this country by local authorities, by health authorities, hospitals, and other specialists. But we saw it also the previous week in Scarborough, where she and William introduced a new type of royal engagement, where they'd raised a shed load of money before they got there, and it was a day where they wanted to leave a lasting legacy of a one-day visit, something really new, as far as we could see, and as far as people in the palace were telling us. But again, a lot of the coverage was about her getting her heel caught in the mud, or about her putting her arm, or somebody putting her arm round her. And I'm not saying any of it's wrong, or I'm not having a go at it. I just think it's an interesting debate about how we treat our members of the royal family. And I think she has come out of her shell in the last few years.
Yeah.
And, she's a very serious woman, and she's trying to bring about change in this country, particularly for children, but also to break this cycle of mental health problems that people develop often from an early age. And personally, I would just like to, when she does say something interesting, I'd like, I think we should listen.
Do you think this is something as well? She's obviously had media training. Do you think this is something she obviously feels herself too? She's saying all these really important messages, and that's the message that she wants to get out there, but people are focusing on the picture perfect moments instead.
Yeah, I think she gets very frustrated because there have been other times when she's made a landmark speech, and all people were asking about was she changed her hairstyle, and we in the media we have to reflect what people are interested in, and I certainly know people who are only interested in what her hairstyle looks like, what she
Yeah,
looks
yeah.
like, what her wardrobe is. But I do think she's got more to offer than that. And but the other thing I wanted to say about this is I think it's really interesting that Kensington Palace has stopped routinely giving out information about what clothes she's wearing.
Mm,
And
very
again,
sad.
I can sort of see two sides to this, and I think they won't really discuss why they've done this. But I think it's really about this frustration that all anybody wants to talk about and write about is what she looks like. And I so I have some sympathy with it, but it's frustrating as a reporter because people still, editors still want you to fill in the gaps and say, well, what was she wearing? And
Mm,
indeed, there are fashion experts who very quickly identify what she was wearing. For me, I try to make it a very quick detail, half a sentence. The princess, comma, who was wearing, blah blah blah. And again, it's an interesting subject, I think, because if you think back to Diana
mm,
and also the Queen, and indeed the current Queen Consort, it has been routine for the palace to give out details about their outfits, and uh, I you also will see every now and again an exhibition either at Buckingham Palace or at one of the historic royal palaces where the royal wardrobe, what
yes,
Diana
of
wore or
course.
whatever, is the centerpiece of. So it is part of the cell of the royal family. It's part of, and the palace isn't stopping completely. I think there will be, like at a film premiere or whatever.
Yes, of
They was
course.
talking about details, and certainly on a an incoming state visit, possibly, but also a foreign tour, where fashion diplomacy can play a role. Where the Princess of Wales can pay tribute to the host country by wearing an item that was designed by a designer from that country.
Yeah.
So,
It's difficult.
well, it is difficult, but I understand Kate's frustration because when we talk about Princess Diana now, I mean, we do talk sometimes about that little black dress she wore
Yes. Yep,
um,
yep.
after Charles had given an interview with Panorama, I think it was. Um, interview with Jonathan Dimbleby. Um, we certainly talk about the dress she wore at the White House when dancing with John Travolta or whatever. But we also talk about the work she did on landmines, on HIV/AIDS. The sort of
Yes.
dealing with the stigma that people suffered in those days. She was one of the first prominent people to really be seen to sort of touching somebody who had HIV at a time when people thought that you die if you touch. Some people thought you die if you touch somebody who had HIV. So she was really dealing with, quite
Heavy.
groundbreaking stuff, and we recognise that now. I can't really remember, although I wasn't royal reporting. I was around when she was around, and
Mm,
I can't really remember whether I think that at the time it was everybody reported this is a groundbreaking moment. She's doing this. She's well, I certainly remember the rows about landmines. So I don't understand why William and Kate sometimes have so many problems getting over what they're doing.
Do you think also the fact that it's now more prevalent and more obvious is the fact that they've changed roles and they're sort of stepping up a gear, and it's a sign of maturing perhaps, or wanting the public to realize, they're not that, we remember even the engagement shoot, don't we, from years ago
Yes,
before they had
yes,
children.
yes.
They're not that young couple anymore who don't have children, met at university. Of course they probably feel that way at heart, but they've moved forward a long way from that moment, haven't they?
Well, they have, yes, and certainly in the first few years, I mean, covering them was so much fun because they were so active and they would do things that older members of the royal family wouldn't do. taking part in archery and playing all sorts of sport and competing against each other.
Mm.
That made it very strong, and I so yesterday, the pictures were. It's a bit of a more difficult sell picture-wise if she's just sitting in a room talking to experts.
Yes.
But what she was talking about was really interesting, I thought, and really important.
Mm.
And it's sometimes frustrating, I think, that um, uh, we don't give that more attention. But at the end of the day, um, television news editors and newspaper editors have a mixture of hard and soft stuff and picture-led stuff, and it's about getting the mix right. And it's not my
Yeah,
job.
it is, and also society's view on things. And actually, that's probably, why Kate probably gets along so well, from a sporting perspective, with sportswomen who obviously now are getting some very good recognition after years of trying. And obviously, there's a long way to go,
Yes,
but she perhaps feels on a level, they do all these fantastic things, and then they get spoken about, on various different media publications about what they wore and who their latest
yeah,
partner is, and what their love life's like.
yeah.
So yes, interesting though. It's a good debate. I have to say, but yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see whether
Mm.
it will
Because,
change. She's
yeah,
more vocal about it, but
and of
what
course,
I
what's interesting as well. I mean, you have to say that although it might be frustrating for her and for William at times, they don't get a negative press.
they don't.
Generally they're very well liked by the British public and by the readers. So the coverage is fairly upbeat, and so I suppose you can contrast that with Meghan, Harry and Meghan, who are much more controversial figures, and the coverage reflects that. But you've had Meghan doing these podcasts for weeks now, coming out on a Tuesday, and they've been getting lots of attention. What she's actually saying rather than what she looks like.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
I don't believe that that's necessarily because what she's been saying has been more interesting than what Kate's been saying. I think it's about pigeonholing, um, uh, but also, I guess, um, it's tempting to see a lot of what Meghan's been saying in those podcasts as her attempt to rewrite history. So this week, for example, she was talking about the label difficult, being labelled difficult. Well, she was labelled difficult by mainly women who were working for her at the palace in the royal household, and so she's sort of trying to say it's misogynistic to label women difficult, but it was actually mainly women who were calling her that, and it's been the same most weeks. So I think that's why there's been a lot of interest in Meghan's podcast, because it just does look like an attempt to rewrite history.
Do you think we will see Kate on Meghan's podcast anytime soon?
I don't think so. I don't get the impression that there is much of a relationship there between them at the moment. Maybe
No,
that will change, but I think the signs are the relations are still pretty strained.
maybe. But I mean, the fact that, she's being pigeonholed so much and stuff, maybe is something that Meghan and them could perhaps bond over. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and but I think William and Kate and other members of the royal family had quite a lot of sympathy with Harry and Meghan, with some of their frustrations. When they were working members of the royal family, I think I don't think it was the case that they were completely uncaring about their concerns at all. Not, far from it. It was just they didn't agree with their approach, which was to essentially quit Britain, break the deal between the British people and members of the royal family in terms of what information is shared about things like godchildren at a christening, and
Mm.
of course to sort of declare open war on the British media.
Mm. Okay. Well, we're going to take this to quite a fluffy poll now, Richard. But it's about the Christmas service, and it is not far off now. I was just trying to book holiday off at work for Christmas, so it's really not that far off. So let's take a look at the poll if we can bring it up. Will you be tuning in to the Christmas service? Yes, 54%. No, 45%. So that's what Daily Express viewers think about.
Well, yeah, but if 54% of the British public tune in, that would be a huge audience, wouldn't it?
Yes,
So,
that is true.
same as we've said about Harry's book. I can't remember what the figures were. I think there was at one point it said something like, I don't know, only 15% of the public in opinion polls were interested in reading the book. But if 15% of 60 odd million people buy your book,
Yeah.
you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, you're doing pretty well. You're in the money. Okay, then. Well, we're going to move on from Kate Middleton now, Catherine. On to The Crown. It's been officially released. I watched 2 episodes last night. It's one of those things on Netflix. You just go, oh, okay, then. All right, I'll watch the next episode. Well, it got released. It's got mixed reaction already. We've spoken about it before, Richard, but for people who are new to the Royal Roundup, obviously the royal family are going to stay silent on this, and I think this will be the case from now on as well, won't it, Richard?
Well, I think so. I mean, there's always a possibility that something annoys them so much that they break that policy. But I just think, as I mentioned last week, I mean, I think that they've traditionally taken the view that they don't want to interfere with artistic freedom. I think what does worry people in the palace is that they fear that not so much in this country, but in the US and Australia, other overseas countries, that viewers actually think that it's true, that it's a documentary rather than a dramatization very loosely based on facts.
Mm.
What has been interesting is in the last few days there's been a bit of a fight back by the makers of The Crown and some of the people involved in it. Robert Lacey wrote a piece for the Times, and Patrick Jeffson, who was Princess Diana's private secretary, has also defended the drama, and they both essentially said that it's truer than people close to the palace have been trying to say. And so Patrick Jeffson, for example, said that it's not the case as the show portrays, that Prince Charles, as he then was, plotted with John Major, Prime Minister, to declare a regency and to get the Queen to abdicate. But he has claimed that Prince Charles did talk to a previous Prime Minister, which I think is assumed to be Margaret Thatcher, about the same thing. So,
Okay.
I mean, Baroness Thatcher isn't around to check that with any longer, so I just don't know what the truth is on that.
No.
But,
No.
again, it's potentially damaging to the new reign, because that was Patrick Jefferson, wasn't it, in his naval uniform? I think because it drags up all of those controversies over the War of the Walesers in the 1990s, the affair and everything else. So I don't think it'll be welcome at the palace, but at the same time, I think they are, at the moment, certainly my impression is that they will try to rise above it.
Yes, indeed. I think that will probably be the case. But nevertheless, it's interesting. It's an interesting watch. That's for sure. And perhaps kind of gives a rough guideline as to what's kind of happened over the years, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the way I was explaining it was that, it's a bit like reading a historical novel about the reign of Henry VIII. very loosely based on facts, but all of the dialogue and some of the characters, don't necessarily reflect what really happened.
No. Okay. Well, that's The Crown for you. Let us know what you think about The Crown. Will you be watching it? Will you be boycotting it? People are very divided over it. So there we go. As with lots of topics in the royal family, people seem to be very divided over, which is going to, in turn, take me on to the next topic today. Harry and Meghan have waded into politics. And we've spoken about this before on the Royal Roundup, but if you're new to the Royal Roundup, then welcome. This is one of the topics that we have spoken about before. On their Archewell website, they have put up a section about voting. Now, there's Meghan with her "I've just voted" badge on. They're playing a bit of a dangerous game, would you say, Richard, by wading into politics slightly with their connection to the royal family still? Or would you say nothing to worry about because they've not said how you should vote?
I think it's a slightly dangerous game, but not as dangerous as it was as when Donald Trump was still president, and that was the real problem. The UK was trying to negotiate a trade deal, a post-Brexit trade deal with the US, which seems as far off as ever now. And there was huge consternation at Buckingham Palace because although Meghan has never said which way to vote, she was taking part in a campaign to get people to register to vote and against sort of voter suppression. And rightly or wrongly, that was seen as essentially being a Democrat campaign, a Democrat-leaning campaign. I think that you have to remember that when they quit, they volunteered. They weren't, as far as I understand it, they weren't asked to make this pledge, but they volunteered that they would uphold the values of the then Queen. And embarrassing the UK in a foreign country isn't upholding the Queen's values. I would say it's less of an issue at the moment, though, because there's a Democratic president, and it's unlikely to affect diplomatic relations in the same way. But it's still slightly dangerous territory. I think I can understand what she's trying to do, and it's of course it's wrong to try and rig the electoral system so that people who are more likely to vote for one party are discouraged from registering. But I think she still has to be careful if she doesn't have the wrath of her family.
When is it pushing it too far? Where's the boundary? Saying vote this way, that's the boundary? Or is it the fact that it's US politics, it's not so much of an issue, whereas if she got more involved in UK politics, that would be the issue?
Well, I would say it's still a potential danger, but I'd say it's less so now. And I think as time goes on, the palace becomes more relaxed about what she and Harry say and do. I think they've just learned that, well, they will just do what they want to do. And, I think qualify that by saying there is still huge concern about what is going to be in Harry's memoir. That's something different. But this particular issue of voting, I would say it's a low level concern.
So to move on slightly now from the voting thing, there is a huge concern you just said. Is that from within the top of the royal family, or just the base?
Well, yeah, I think certainly within within the ranks of the courtiers, the people who work for and are close friends of the royal family. There's deep concern that anything that revives the rift between the Sussexes and the rest of the family and the institution of monarchy, is going to be hugely unwelcome.
Okay, all right then. Well, we've got that book and all those bombshell moments to come out in due course, which we'll be discussing on here. Looking ahead to the rest of the week, we are going to see the royal family again on Sunday, Richard.
Yeah, well, it's we've seen the start of remembrance events really today with the Queen Consort at the Field of Remembrance, Westminster Abbey, and she paid tribute to the Queen. There was a special area plot dedicated in memory to Queen Elizabeth II, and then on Saturday night, we've got a full complement of working members of the royal family out at the Royal Albert Hall for the annual Festival of Remembrance. And then on Sunday, they'll all be out again, in both cases, including Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, Princess Anne's husband, who doesn't really count as a working member of the family, but he'll be there as well. And they'll all be at the Cenotaph on Sunday. The Earl of Wessex is taking the salute in Horse Guards. We've got new wreaths being laid. The Queen Consort, the King's got a new wreath with his racing colours on. The Queen Consort's having a wreath laid on her behalf by an equerry for the first time, really sort of following in the footsteps of the Queen Mother, the last Queen Consort, who had a wreath laid every year. What else? Do we
see the children?
No, I don't think. No, I'd be very surprised. I mean, it's a good question, but I'd still be surprised if George and Charlotte and Louis were up on the balcony. I mean, that would be something. I think particularly Louis is probably
Louis
for it. But yeah, interesting question actually. But I'm not currently. I'm not expecting them to be there, but they might surprise us.
But will we see the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales both up on the balcony?
They'll be on the Foreign Office balcony watching from.
So Queen Consort, not due to the change of role, she won't be on ground level.
No, she won't be on the ground level, but a wreath will be laid on her behalf. So that's something new.
Okay.
That's got her family race colours on it. Her wreath. So it's going to be a busy few days, and this was going to be the first state occasion since the Queen's funeral. So,
I mean, how many people can we expect to be there, Richard? What
in Whitehall?
Yeah,
thousands. I mean, they let thousands in. It's still fairly tight security, and then there were usually 10,000 veterans marching.
Okay, and that will all obviously be televised, so we can see that as it happens as well.
It will, and I'll be there as well, so it'll be in the Express.
So it will be in the Express. Very good plug at the end there, Richard. Okay, well, it was a longer Royal Roundup today, but there was so much to discuss. We will be back next week again at a time to be confirmed. It's been a very, very, very few busy days for Richard, so we'll see when he's free, and thank you for bearing with us today. We did get through the technical issues in the end, and we got lots of intel from Richard, so that's good news. Richard, thank you. You can follow Richard at Royal Reporter to get all the exclusive videos and pictures from all the events that he goes to, where he's quite literally next to the royal family, if you're a royal follower, and you can catch up with our playlist on Facebook for the Royal Roundup, where you can see all the previous episodes and how much the royal family have been changing literally within the past year or so, and what they've been up to. So go take a look. Thank you, Richard, once again, and we'll be back next week.
See you soon.